I'm resident of Collinwood, Joel Staines, here joined by my buddy Gordon Dymowski and my buddy Patrick McCray. We're here to talk Dark Shadows episode 960, chosen by Patrick. And this episode is narrated by Lewis Edmonds. It's written by Gordon Russell, and it's directed by Leela Swift. Thank God. But this episode, very, very interesting, guys. I have so many questions, but I'll start with this one. The Leviathan arc is a very conflicted arc with many Dark Shadows fans. Now, the writers here choose a very interesting subplot here by having Bruno's getting tired of getting smacked around. He has literally saved Jeb's bacon. He feels Jeb isn't appreciating him because Jeb smacks him around. So Bruno gets it in his head to take Jeb to the mausoleum to have the werewolf attack him. That's his plot, at least. It doesn't happen in this specific episode, but that's Bruno's plot. Initially, it wasn't, but after the smacking around and Jeb says, I follow, I lead, you follow, Bruno's had enough. I find it interesting that the writers are going this route with the Leviathan arc, a race of beings who seem to rely on absolute loyalty. What did you guys think about this?
They have chosen the wrong people to surround themselves with if they rely on absolute loyalty. That's really, I mean, you got, when Sky Rumson is the ace in your hole, that's not a good thing. When he's the most reliable guy around, a man who after his wife finds out he's a cultist, bursts into the room with a torch to kill her, stating, I really thought we could work it out, with no irony. I mean, that's who the Leviathans are. So yeah, I don't know. Gordon, what do you think?
Well, I think the Leviathan arc I think it's the writer's attempt to try to do something different after 1897, because that was, when you do all that, what's your next logical step? I also think that with the Leviathan arc, and kind of leading into a little bit into the whole, and a little bit with the 1995 flash forward, I think you can see some of the tenor of the time starting to creep in.
Oh yeah. I mean, this the Manson family. Boom, right there.
You've got the Manson family. You've got that kind of General Nixon-esque paranoia. I do wonder if Roger Ebert was watching this episode and inspired him for the climactic scene of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. Or where it's the one dark.
Of it. Oh, I know the movie. I would love to think that. Yeah.
Especially with Bruno's hair. I mean, I think that's the best thing about this episode is Bruno's hair. But I also think in this is the I think it's a plot device that is used in a lot of drama, which is the guy who's, reminded that he's the underling, so he's going to get back at him.
Sure.
And I think the way that Pennick and Stroka play it, and Pennick and Stroka will do your taxes for free if you buy them a sandwich. Just remember that. They play it as, Pennick is basically, when you think about it, Pennick is just basically he is a child god, for lack of a better term, because he's only a few months old. Yeah. And Stroke is kind of, and Bruno is kind of like the, he's kind of swinging, hey, everything goes. And I think that it's an interesting turn of events. And I also think that it's interesting to see Bruno actually think like, no, I'm not going to kill him. I'm just going to throw him to a werewolf because I know he's a werewolf. You kind of expect. I kind of wish they do that to Sky Rumson, is just throw him into it, but we all know that doesn't happen. But I think it's interesting that Chris is surprised at the power that they have, that they could bring back the sheriff back to life, and all he has to suffer for it is a weird wig and some Herman Munster makeup.
Well, what I really love about this episode too is the fact that Bruno is taking the initiative to, after Smack, to betray, Christopher Pennock's character here, Jeb Hawks. I really like the fact that the writers are sort of taking this, and yeah, it's in a lot of soap operas. Betrayal happens.
I get some technical difficulties
with evil members and stuff and underlings. But I find it interesting. I'm sort of wondering, and this is my next question to you guys. Do you think that Bruno he also knows the score, that he knows?
Yes, I agree.
That Jeb has sort of pissed off Oberon by not following the book, because that was a big deal earlier on.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Bruno, it's less the second, he's less the lackey who's getting smacked around, and more the guy who's like, hey, we are going wildly off plan. This is we are not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And you would think that the Leviathans, for being these kind of powerful, Lovecraftian menace, you think they get their stuff together. Like, you think, maybe hire an HR person to kind of figure out, okay, maybe relying on a creature that is barely weeks old to be the leader of your of your movement. Maybe that's not such a smart idea. And I think Bruno, I think he's playing it as being the guy he's aware of more. He knows more than he's letting on that he knows. And also, he's also quiet, whereas Jeb is basically like, he's threatening everybody. He goes to Roger and says, okay, hey, I'm going to talk to David and all this other stuff. And with Roger, it's Edmonds plays him as like the outraged father, but and maybe this is just me reading into it, but there's a real a strange vibe of, it's almost like Edmonds doesn't want to play it. He's like, oh dear, I want to join Thea and Jonathan for steaks after this taping. I just want to get out of here. But I think there's that I'm not sure if that's the actor or if that's the performance, where it's that kind of discomfort. But you can see where Jeb is basically, he's a kid going, hey, I'm in charge, and Bruno is, ironically, he's the mature one in the relationship. Because again, hair. And so you can see where he's scheming, but it's not the I'm better than this guy. He's thinking, oh, well, anybody can do better than this guy. You know what? A lamp can be better than Jeb Hawks at this point.
Yeah, Jeb is. I think one of. I'm sorry, Joel. Go for it.
No, go ahead.
Well, one of the. I think one of the undoings of this storyline, not that it's bad. It's funny. The Leviathan storyline largely suffers from being in comparison to 1897. Coming right after it. If it came right after a number of the other storylines, it'd be great, or greater in our perception of it. What I was going to say regarding Jeb and his, the fact that he's really not particularly effective at a lot that he does, which is, of course, the thing that allows him to turn into a likable, suitor for Carolyn, which is a big order in the storytelling department. I mean, it really is. This is who we're going to marry Carolyn off to, and this is who she's going to be in mourning over for quite a while. So you can't have him be, Nicholas Blair. Unfortunately, kind of like Adam, another, Carolyn suitor, is that because they can't be that dad, while they're stuck in the villain department, we're just kind of, it's like we're in a rain delay in a baseball game or something. It's because you see it screaming down, the 5 that, Jeb's going to wind up being a decent guy. So it's a very awkward thing. I think one of the things that, had the show continued, I think the Dark Shadows writers eventually would have perfected formulaically is how to have a good bad guy that can be credibly threatening and a decent romantic lead. Because I think Barnabas and Quentin were kind of accidents, largely helped with miraculous casting that then the writers were able to take great advantage of.
Here's something I'll give a lot of credit to with Christopher Pennock. Chris knows how to play a heel. I mean, he makes Jeb a heel a lot. But I think actors have so much natural sex appeal. And Jeb does, Christopher Pennock does. He has so much.
So does Lou Jacoby. Keep going.
Yeah, so does Michael Stroka. So right. What's your point?
The name says it all.
My point is, I like Christopher Pennock as the heel. I like his character, but I think he's just so naturally good looking that I could see it on. It's like, man, this guy should just not. Okay, so he's cocky, he's arrogant. So was Quentin Collins when we met him.
Well, yeah,
and we're not so.
But I think there's a very fundamental difference between Quentin and Jeb.
No, I know that. I'm with you. But I think, too, we're not so far removed from 1897 that we've forgotten how, to be fair, yeah, from a story context, Jeb Hawks is a being that was literally created to take over the world. And he's very immature. But Christopher Pennock's performance, I don't think this is Chris doing this on purpose. I just think he's so naturally charming and good looking, and he's a little arrogant, his character, that you can't help but fall in love with the guy the way Carolyn is.
Okay, Gordon, you have some thoughts on this, and I definitely have some thoughts on this.
Go ahead, guys. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, one key difference is that when we meet Quentin, after we see his ghost, we meet the character of Quentin. He has grown into being an arrogant. He has grown to being the way he is because he's dealing with his brother and his grandmother and everything else. And we see him when he finds out when his children have died. First, that he's a father, and that both of his children are dead, presumably. We see him start to move forward and realize that, hey, look, I have to be different now. He doesn't become a hero. He doesn't become an anti-hero, but we see him kind of growing into like a morality of sorts, so to speak. With Jeb, you have to understand, this is a guy who, his life is basically, in story terms, only a few weeks, because he started as a thing in a box. Then he was Alexander. Then he was a baby. Then he was Alexander with Barnabas, and then he was Michael, and then he was Jeb. This is a powerful being wrapped in the, mentally he's a child. He is having a temper tantrum. He's not, Chris Pennock is a very handsome man, but the reason why he's not, maybe he appealed to, he would appeal to Carolyn, is that he's a big kid. He's got an adult, destiny put on him. He's having a temper tantrum. Like he deserves to get knocked down because he's not an adult emotionally, and that's the key difference. Quentin embraces his adulthood and realizes, hey, look, I got to do stuff differently. Jeb is just like, I don't care. I'm the leader. Bruno, get a haircut. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, the key difference is that, and what makes the compelling or the threatening villains on the show profoundly threatening is that they know better and they are choosing to do naughty things. In the case of both Adam and Jeb, they don't know any better. They have fallen in with the wrong crowd, and or they are told that they are people of destiny. That's a really interesting thought, because you have here you've got this great WASP culture in the middle of intense civil rights awareness, and you have this blonde Ubermensch type character who is bad. Why? Because his parents and his family have basically told him to be bad. They have told him, hey, you shall inherit the earth. You are entitled to all of this. That's a political angle on this. I never thought that as much as anything, he's an analogy for, privileged racist white kids who basically just need a deprogramming. That they are victims of the past, due to this insane social programming they received, as much as anyone else. And while I'm sure that wasn't number one on Sam Hull's agenda of the day, at the same time, it's a very interesting coincidence, and that just took me off in a direction I wasn't expecting to go.
I think it's really interesting that I'm with you guys that you do have a character who's not very mature. You're right. He's weeks old. He's expected to marry Carolyn, and then there's the rules that are attached that he's supposed to. Oh, Carolyn's father is supposed to give Carolyn away. Guess what? They killed Carolyn's father.
Yeah, it's a little late for that.
Right. And that's what Barnabas brings to his attention. He goes, well, Carolyn's father's dead. I don't know how we're going to do this now. Well, you can just marry Carolyn. Well, it's not the same thing. I'm not her dad. Even though Barnabas is stalling for it's now this, to be fair, that's not in this episode. Even though Barnabas is just trying to stall, he is right. He's not her dad. It wouldn't even be remotely the same thing or close to the same thing if Barnabas did actually give her away to Jeb or even wanted to.
If there's one thing Barnabas Collins is not, it's a dad. Keep going.
Yeah, Adam can attest to that. I mean, what? So there's.
Yeah, he might be a father, but he sure ain't a dad.
Right. That's true. I really like the fact that Jeb does fall in love with Carolyn, and you can see why. Now, is this sort of, too much all at once? It could be, but I do like the fact that they have it happen, because how does any great love story end with Dark Shadows? Tragically. Dark Shadows has a beautiful Dark Shadows love stories are like wrestling weddings. They all end bad. So.
Well, except for the ultimate one. I mean, Catherine and Bromwell, that goes well. Their love became a living legend, my friend.
That's in parallel time. Oh my God.
Wait, you made me stay in parallel time for 6 months, and now you write it off as not counting? No, Jewel. No.
No, it counts. But when we look at the original timeline, weddings in Dark Shadows, they don't end well.
Joel, just for what you said about that not counting, I have the appropriate punishment.
Oh no!
You have to, and you have to watch 5 times consecutively. Halloween Ends.
Oh my God.
That's a lot of end.
I don't know the DVD. I have no intention.
Slip in Howard's end there at one point just for variety.
Here's the thing too with Dark Shadows, and I love that this episode you picked this episode. The writers do a very smart thing in creating tension between two characters, one loyal to the Leviathan and the other who is supposed to be loyal to the Leviathan, but he's helped turn Barnabas back into a vampire. He's done a lot of mistakes. Jeb Hawks has created a lot of mistakes and problems for the Leviathans as well.
He is the Inspector Clouseau of snake cult messiahs.
And keep in mind, a lot of Jeb's mistakes are because he is having a temper tantrum. I mean, this is Barnabas, it looks like you're against me. You're a vampire now. Again, it's not like this. It's not, we're not dealing with I Claudius here. We're dealing with basically an immature god.
I feel sorry for Nicholas Blair at that moment. I really do.
Yeah, Nicholas.
When he gets the news.
Yeah, because Nicholas Blair does not like cleanup. He likes to be. Now, Nicholas Blair, he should have been the leader for the Leviathans because for all of his mistakes, he could do it with charm. He knows how to improvise. He's got that kind of aura around him. But Jeb is just like, and understand, this was an episode written by a guy in his 40s. The two main writers, Sam Hall and Gordon Russell, were both in their 40s at that point. And being in your 40s, so they lived through the Depression. They lived through kind of the war and World War II and all that stuff. So they're coming at this not with the idea of, and it's touching on what Patrick said earlier. They're not coming at this with like, okay, he's a young guy, he's trying but failing. They're like, he's a dirty, filthy hippie, for lack of a better term.
Exactly. And he is.
Yeah, that sheepskin coat did not fool anybody.
Oh God, that amazing. Now I don't want to truncate this, but I do have another thing in this episode I want to talk about when we move on. I just throw that out there as a bookmark.
I really like the dead Sheriff Davenport in this episode.
Okay, there we go. We go. Ding, ding, ding.
Go ahead, Patrick.
That's what I wanted to talk about. So keep going, Jewel.
Okay. So I really like the fact that here's Sheriff Davenport. He dies, and they bring him back. They bring him back to babysit Chris Jennings in the mausoleum. Bruno's like, here's Sheriff Davenport. And I love how Chris is turning away from him because he feels guilty and he should. And Sheriff Davenport's got the gun. And I love the makeup here for this zombie effect. It really looked cool. I'm a fan of how they just made him look, the hair, the makeup. I'm a sucker for I'm a sucker for makeup.
Yes, you are.
Good.
He's okay. He's Solomon Grundy. He looks like Solomon Grundy, but he's more articulate. And the thing I really I don't remember, it may even be in this episode. I'm jumbling north of the eyebrows right now. But what is the ultimate fate of Sheriff Davenport? Does he get killed a second time or something? Do we know?
I'm not sure.
I'm looking it up as we speak. Sheriff Davenport was later killed a second time by Chris Jennings in his werewolf form. By the way, everyone, spoilers.
Oh, so wait. So there's a possibility that he doesn't get killed. There's a possibility that he becomes a werewolf zombie. Think about it.
Mm-hmm.
We've never seen a werewolf kill a zombie before. We don't know what would happen. Sheriff D is a swinger. I think he has more personality dead than he did alive. And what I think would be funny is if the people of Collinsport agreed. They could have done a whole series following this guy. And one of the things, like the Garrison Keillor character, Senator Kay Thorvaldsen, I think we learned that Sheriff Davenport's first name is Sheriff. Even if they claim it's something else.
Yeah,
I love this character.
Yeah, there should have been a spinoff. You know, Sheriff Davenport, zombie werewolf. You know, he goes around Collinsport. He solves crimes. You know, it's like, you know, somebody broke into the Blue Whale. Okay, yeah, I got that. Someone else is like, oh, hey, they tore that tag off the pillow that says "Do not remove under penalty of law." You know, you could have a scene where someone is walking down the street and Patterson says, "Stop! Those shoes don't go with those pants."
Well, that's the thing, is that I think he more becomes, you know, he's the sheriff who's everybody's pal. Mm-hmm. He's like the Cyrano character in the movie Roxanne. Mm-hmm. You know, I think he's a friendly one. He's a good guy.
He would be a better husband for Carolyn than Jeb Hawks.
I think they end up dating at one point.
Okay.
So, you know, I see this as like the courtship of Eddie's father. You know, that he ends up being the most charismatic cat in Collinsport. And, you know, he just has to worry about decomposition and things, you know. So I think it's pretty funny. The moment he started talking, you know, I knew that we were in for something special. And I think he even has some logical questions for people at one point. You know, it's not like he's just a drone. Doesn't he say something like, wait, you just want me to stand here and watch him? He has rational self-interest. That had to be something that the writers found funny. I mean, you know, they obviously found amusing, right? And then there's other stuff that I think I think they just sort of took with a straight face, you know, as much as they could, but not this one.
Yeah, I wonder how much of this had been like, you know, Gordon Russell's at his typewriter and he's trying to figure out how to write this. And he's like, he reaches in and gets his bottle of whiskey and, you know, a couple of shot glasses. You know, Sam Hall comes in. They're doing the whole Mad Men theme. You know, they're drinking bourbon and smoking, and, you know, they're like, you know, Sam Hall like, we should be joining Louis and Thayer. I want a steak right now. And Gordon Russell's like, yeah, we gotta get this script done. Okay, let's just make the zombie werewolf guy rational. Yeah, whatever.
It's like, you know, how are we gonna get all this exposition in? Oh, the hell with it. Just have the zombie talk. What do you mean have the zombie talk? I mean, it's not like these things actually exist. It's not like there are rules. Sure, let the zombie talk. Why not? Zombie rights too.
Yeah, and as a side note, I think Patrick and I should develop a two-man show involving Sam Hall and Gordon Russell. We'll just make up conversations. I think that'd be wonderful. And the great thing is we could change roles every night. So one night I'm Sam, you're Gordon. The next night you're Sam, I'm Gordon.
Okay, that sounds. That ties into Beckett, which we'll be doing soon.
Okay.
Because they did that. You know, they did that on Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they switched parts. So yeah. I just throw it out there. Lou Jacoby.
We're doing that Saturday, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, that's right. I gotta watch a 2.5-hour movie.
Yeah. Joel, what do you think of Lou Jacoby? Do you know who I'm talking about when I mention this guy?
No.
He's the uncle in My Favorite Year. The one who says, "So, did you stubborn?"
Oh, okay, yeah.
Him, yeah, he's nature's most erotic creature.
See,
yeah, I can't believe you forgot who Lou Jacoby was, Joel. I'm astounded. I just don't know.
Now, you're being rough on the guy. Now, Joel, Lou Jacoby is a great guy, but he never made it onto Dark Shadows, unfortunately.
What's you guys' favorite scene in this episode?
The zombie. Just the introduction of Sheriff Davenport and his that, and I think just all of the scenes between Bruno and and Jeb, specifically because even though Chris Pennock and Michael Stroke are in their 20s and were very much of the drug scene and, very much, hipsters, and I'm sure called each other man all the time, nevertheless, when speaking the line man as written by a 40-year-old, suddenly they sound as awkward as the 40-year-old would sound.
Yeah, it you know what it reminded me of, and this is probably going to be it would have been a contemporary reference at the time as well as now. There's a show, Jewel, back in the day called The Mod Squad, and it was basically three hippies. You got your rich white guy who gets in a lot of trouble. You've got your black guy, you've got your pretty blonde, and you have a black guy. And the idea is they're all in trouble, but there's a cop who thinks, oh, we can have them do like undercover, hippie stuff. And so they become part of the police. And a lot of television at that time was written by, dudes in their 40s who had no idea how to write for young people. And you also around that time had a movement where, because they were finding that television audiences were, they found that advertisers didn't want to reach people in rural areas. They were finding that like people in cities spend money. So part of that was a shift into more of a social realism. The formal term was relevance. So right now we would probably call it like politically correct or woke, but it was a lot of social commentary. So I don't think Dark Shadows was doing that, but that whole idea of let's write for the kids was
oh, definitely,
input.
because they also knew their audience was kids. I mean, they had this amazing summer of 1969. They had the record album out. They were selling those weird stuffed heads. A couple of board games.
Yeah, Jonathan Frid was on Bozo Circus.
Yes. So yeah, they had all those kids hanging around outside. Yeah, just even the mildest demographics indicated that a hip young guy would have been the thing. And the crazy thing is, there's a part of me that wonders if like David J. and the kid who played, I guess, Alexander, is he the sort of the 13 or 14-year-old one, right? Whatever the middle Leviathan or the second Jeb Leviathan child is, if they had been bigger hits, especially the Alexander one, I guess, the older boy, if he
that would have been Michael Maitland.
Yeah, Michael Maitland. Yeah, I think he would have hung around longer. Dark Shadows by this point knew how to move pretty quickly to capitalize on a new star. And, I think fan mail was more effective than Nielsen. I really do, in terms of determining who's watching the show and what they're wanting.
By the way, this episode was broadcast February 27th, 1970. It was recorded February 10th, 1970. I bring that up for this reason. Sharon Tate died August 9th, 1969. See, my thing of it is, like, I get they're going for you guys said the hippie thing, but the Summer of Love, as we'll call it, had a very severe consequence with the Manson family. I mean,
yeah.
Well, and Woodstock was a real mess.
Right.
Yeah,
and you have to keep something in mind, Joel, that the writers weren't necessarily thinking. It was a lot of times when you're writing, you're dealing with the outside world. So I don't think it was like, I think in terms of the characters, the writers were thinking, okay, we'll just make them hip kids because that's what they are. but a lot of that stuff is permeating their writing, the spirit of the time. It's like during COVID, there are a lot of writers who decided to write pandemic themed fiction because it was their way of working through it. Another writer by the name of John Scalzi wrote a novel, which I recommend people read, called The Kaiju Appreciation Society, where it takes place during like a pandemic. The difference is at one point, this person is invited to basically enter a parallel world where kaiju actually exist. And by kaiju, I mean like Godzilla-sized monsters, but we're not into that. We're into Dark Shadow. So, but yeah, they're not. I don't think a lot of art, and a lot of writing tends to be subconscious. I don't think it was like I think the writers had like a vague idea of what hippies were, but they were also influenced by the tenor of the time. So I don't think a lot of it was intentional. I think it was just when you're dealing with again, if you're dealing with an existential garbage fire, it's going to come out in your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as I said, the sort of the political themes and stuff with Jeff being this, ubermensch because that's how he's been taught, not because that's what reality is. It all is just kind of, it's on their minds, but they still know that they're not necessarily writing a political piece. It's just, when all of that is the broth that you're immersed in, your writing is going to have, I hate to stretch the metaphor, it's going to have that flavor. And for me, the overall theme of Dark Shadows ultimately is taken from this. It's and it develops over time, and I don't think they sat down to do this, but you have writers who were, very politically aware. You had some of the writers who were gay. You had writers who were Jewish, and they were very aware that they were both part of the upper echelons of at least one segment of New York society, and always going to be not. There's always going to be some reason for them to be kind of on the outside looking in. And New York society, which had been very old and very white and very rich in, the upper, sort of Vanderbilt levels, they were, all of that was, their empire was beginning to recede, especially with the acknowledgement that, women and people of color existed. And that, and so, what is this society going to do? Well, it has two choices. It can become far more of a meritocracy and stop having, arbitrary prejudices, and basically welcome in the other, and not just welcome in the other, but realize that the other is there, and that the other is, and the other has to be that. No, I did. Okay, I'm going to phrase it like this: that they have to learn to live with themselves as being just one of the people at the table, rather than kindly letting the other in to sit at the table. It's not that story. The other's at the table. The other's always been at the table. Now they just have to make sure everyone has a menu. So I'm really into food right now because I'm very hungry. So that to me is kind of the unifying principle within Dark Shadows. And these writers are seeing that, and I think they use the supernatural as means of talking about it. So there.
My favorite episode, or my favorite scene in this episode, is the fact that Roger has no problem confronting Jen. I like it. I like the fact that Lewis Edmonds is, trying to be your baby face here, and He comes across really good.
Yeah, I mean, he's Willie Edmonds is a guy. He's a guy from Louisiana. He secretly knows that the upper echelons are looking down on him, especially once he drops the patois, and so the opportunity to parody that is a great delight. And Louis Edmonds does it all the time. And this is a terrific scene. I mean, he later kills Bruno, I think, with a candlestick, like some massive version of Clue gone wrong, or right, as the case may be.
When do you guys want to do the next episode? Because Sunday or Saturday we're doing Beckett.
Whenever. I can't do it Saturday because I'm doing Beckett.
Yeah, I can't do Saturday either because I'm doing Beckett. I'm looking forward to the scene where he jumps into somebody and Dean Stockwell comes out with the calculator and says, Ziggy is saying you need to change this. I'm looking forward to Beckett.
No. It's where Ted Danson is curmudgeonly with Terry Farrell.
Oh, that Beckett.
Oh, well, no, that's Becker. Becker, I don't even know her. Joel, what kind of show are you running?
I have no idea anymore.
Yeah, he didn't even bother asking me what my favorite scene in the episode was.
I asked you both what it was.
Well, okay. Well, my favorite scene, just to repeat, it's the interaction between Jeb and Bruno, and Michael Stroker's hair. I mean, that's basically it.
Michael Stroker should have got to play a Collins, but
let me ask you this: was Michael Stroker's hair achieved by him putting his thumb into his mouth and blowing into it really hard? Is that what elevated it like that? I'd like to believe that.
I honestly think his hair is just that naturally good because here's
I have a 2-word answer for that. Vidal Sassoon.
What was Vidal putting in his hair?
Product. Yes, product.
Let's leave it at that.
There's a picture of him without how his hair is all poofed up like that. And he's just got naturally good looking hair. Some people just do.
Yes, I know.
My
father has hair like Dean Martin. I don't understand it.
Yeah, my dad had hair like Stacy Keach because he also had a big ass bald spot in back. Thank God it didn't pass it down to me.
For the longest time, I had hair like either John Saxon or Robert Vaughn. It wasn't fun. My forehead just got larger and larger.
Very interesting, Joe.
You don't hear many women walking down the street going, "Ooh, he's got that John Saxon hair." I've never heard any human actually speak that way either. And I would be deeply disturbed if they did, no matter what they were saying.
I remember when I was a teenager, somebody's like, how do you what hairstyle do you like? I'm like, I don't give a shit. And I still don't. Anyway.
Well, a lot of my female friends have encouraged me to get a haircut, which I did, because they want, quote, more silver in the fox.
Oh, well, all right. That's a good thing. I turned gray when I was 15, and it served me well. Better gray than Ned.
And remember, everyone, if you want me and Patrick to develop that 2-man show about Sam Hall and Gordon Russell, leave a comment below, like this video, share it on the interwebs, and show it at parties. Please do. We need your support.
As you scratch, so shall ye sniff.
Is there anything you guys want to add about episode 960?
Well, it's one better than 959, but one less than 961.
I made a way. That's all I'll say.
All right, I'll see you guys Saturday night for Beckett. Links to Gordon Dymowski's what?
Joel, thank you. I was just going to thank you.
You're welcome. You don't have to thank me. Links to Gordon Dymowski's Amazon page is going to be in the description box. Link to the Dark Shadows Day book Unbound is going to be in the description box. Go pick that up if you haven't already. The physical edition, goddammit. The physical edition. You guys have a great and safe night.
All right. Take
Bye.
care, sir.
Good night, all.